Okay, well, my name's Ernest Hebert. I go by Ernie, and let's see. Today happens to be my birthday. I'm uh, I'm 85, and I never thought I'd make it this long. Um, when I turned 80, I decided to celebrate with an old bad habit. I drank a shot of whiskey and smoked a cigarette, and I did that today too. So
Nice.
I do that every birthday. I bought a pack when I was 80, so that means I've used, you know, 5 cigarettes. And if I use the entire pack, I'll be 100 years old. I don't think I'll make it, but so somebody else will have to finish those cigarettes. Uh, I thought I'd talk today about writing a novel, and to me, the writing of a novel is really exciting because it's going to take not weeks, not months, but years. At least it takes me years to write a novel, and I've published 11 novels, and what's really fascinating is they're all different. I mean, not just the books themselves, but the actual process of writing the book, which for me is almost as interesting as the book itself. So I thought about I thought I talked today about writing my novel, The Old American, which is a my first historical novel. It was really a wonderful adventure, and it actually started a long time ago when I was maybe I'm guessing around 10 years old, right around that time period. Uh, I was a student at St. Joseph Elementary School in Keene, New Hampshire, and I can remember, leaving the school and walking down the street short ways, and it was a big hedge, and I peeked through the hedge, and I could see a rock, a big rock, like a monument with a plaque on it, and uh, I peeked through it. I couldn't read the plaque, and there was a lawn behind the hedge, and I thought, well, I better not walk on the lawn. So I left, but I was fascinated by what that plaque must have said, and a lot of time went by, maybe a whole year for all I know, because I can't remember exactly. But anyway, eventually I got up my courage and I squeezed through the hedge and I went up and I read the rock, and the rock said, uh, 1736, Nathan Blake built the first log house on this site. 1746, Nathan was captured by Indians in an Indian attack, and taken to Canada. He spent 3 years with ransom by his wife Elizabeth Graves. So he came back. He was captured in 1746. He came back in 1749, and he was quite a guy, a very spectacular human being in a lot of ways. For one thing, he was very athletic. He was a wrestler and a runner. Uh, and when he was captured, he was a a slave for about a year, in which his master discovered he was a great runner, and in those days, during the summer, the Indians, the women stayed home and farmed, and the men went in their canoes to various trade fairs where the Indians would swap particular things that they made. And in my story, they make moccasins, and so they would swap their moccasins for other things. And of course, like any fair, there was a lot of entertainment, and one of the entertainments they had was racing. And his master entered him in races, and he won. He won every single race until one day. This one day he was told that if he didn't lose a race, they would be trouble because they had the tribe from northern Canada, the Cree, had brought in a ringer, and Nathan deliberately lost the race. And it's funny, he was with the Indians 3 years, and that was the one thing he complained about, was that he had to throw a race. When he was finally released after 3 years, he went back to farming his land, and in 1776 he became an American revolutionary. In the end, Nathan lived to be just 2 months shy of his 100th birthday, so he was quite a remarkable guy. And and so when I as a kid, when I saw that plaque with his name on it, it fascinated me, and the reason it fascinated me was that I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I certainly was not a writer at age 10, but I knew that I had to do something. And it wasn't until I was in college when I decided that I was writing a term paper, and I happened to read the history of that story, of Nathan Blake's story. It was such a fascinating story that I thought I wanted to be and I wanted to write that. So I actually started to write the story, and I got to maybe a quarter of the page down, maybe half a page, and I realized that two things. First of all, I didn't know enough about the time period to write a novel, and secondly, I had no idea how you did actually write a novel. So I put the whole thing aside, and it wasn't until I published uh, six novels that I actually decided that I now had the skills to actually write that book. Uh, and so I wrote. I spent a whole year just researching, uh, and I learned all these really fascinating things. For one thing, when Nathan was captured, I said he was a very athletic man. Well, he uh, he was in his cabin when the Indians attacked, and he took his family, his wife and a couple of kids, to the stockade so they were safe. And then he went out. He went back to the cabin to let his animals out of the barn because he knew that they would burn the barn. And he succeeded in doing that. And he went out a back door to get away, and he found himself facing a a native holding a musket pointed at him, and he said to the Indian, he said, just trying to keep us cool. He said, it's mighty early in the morning for this kind of stuff, and I've had nothing to eat. And he never expected to be understood. Well, the native talked to him in perfect English. He said, "It's mighty." He said, "It's a poor Englishman that cannot go to Canada without his breakfast." So the guy was not only he was not only able to speak English, he was able to make a joke. So he must have been a really smart guy. And you know, let me interrupt myself for a moment there. I see that Josette's name came up. Josette, do you have a question or anything? One thing you want to say?
No, not yet.
Pardon?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. So you don't mind this long, shaggy dog story?
No, 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 no. I'm
Okay, you're
okay.
my only audience. So
Oh, there's probably other people watching. They're hiding.
okay. Well, anyway, uh, uh,
It
anyway,
looks like people are watching on Facebook Live. I can see a few people are
okay, great.
checking us out. So,
Well, anyway, what was fascinating to me was that he described his captor as an older man, so he was probably a translator, which is why he spoke such good English. Uh, and in those days, in the rules of engagement, 1746, if I captured you or you captured me, the captor gets to keep the captive. So he became Nathan's slave, and or rather, I'm sorry, yeah, rather Nathan became his slave. So, but and on the so they walked from Keene to the Connecticut River, which is about maybe 12 miles, uh, and about halfway through, Nathan was had his arms tied behind his back, and he was able to slip free. And when his master bent to drink, he picked up a rock. He was going to stone a man, and he couldn't bring himself to do it. He couldn't bring himself to to kill this man, so he did nothing. And the at first they took they what they did was they went to the Connecticut River, and they came down on canoes, and they what they did was they sink the canoes and put big rocks in them so that nobody knows where they are. So they brought the canoes back up and made it. I don't know how exactly. They went up the Connecticut River, then went up one of the probably the maybe the White River, and anyway, they eventually got to Lake Champlain, and from there they go to Montreal. Uh, that's quite a canoe ride, don't you think? And and he, and he, and in Montreal, Nathan with two other men was uh, had to run the gauntlet, and the gauntlet was they would be natives on both sides, and you had to run between them, and they could do what they want. They could stone you, they could beat you, or they could let you pass. And the first guy who went through was a young guy, and he was slapped around, but he made it to the end of the gauntlet. The second guy was a really big and very angry man for being captured, and he fought the Indians and was uh, severely wounded and probably died. It's not really known. And when Nathan went through, there was something about him that um, the Indians let him through. He was never touched. So he was able to walk through the gauntlet. And then he was taken to Canada by his master. And I mentioned earlier that his master discovered that Nathan was a great runner. So he actually, they formed a friendship. Nathan was became friendly with his master, and they spent that year. And at the end of the year, his master died, and lo and behold, you can't believe what actually happened. What happened was that Nathan was elected to take his place, and he actually married the widow of his master and became himself a kind of a sub chief in this tribe, which was outside of Quebec City, which is even further away than Montreal. And he spent a year with the Indians. At the end of the second year, he told the Indians he wanted to go home. He wanted to go back to his English wife and his family. And the Indians said that they would release him to the French because they knew that if they released him to the French, or he knew that if they released him to the French, that the French would put him in a jail and then exchange him for a French prisoner being held by the English. But the Indians would not release him right away. They said they would release him after he had. This is the quote in the history. After he had built them a house like the English build. So Nathan, who's by now had, I think the phrase would be, went Indian. He was acting like an Indian. He was married to an Indian. Of course, you have to remember now that natives in those days were sometimes called Indians, but you know what else they were called? They were called Americans because they were Americans. They were from America, and of course, Nathan and his colonial family and friends, they were not Americans. They were English. So the guy they asked him to build a house like the English built. Nathan spent an entire year building them a post and beam house as you would build on the frontier, which is kind of ironic because Nathan had built a log house, but he hadn't built a real house for himself yet. He had only had a log house, so he ends up building this house for the Indians, or the Americans as they were called. I don't know what the name of the tribe was. I went to Canada, talked to a lot of native peoples, and never learned what the actual tribe was that Nathan was part of. But anyway, he built this house, and at the end of the third year, the Indians kept their part of the bargain, and they released him to the French. And the French exchanged him for a prisoner held by the English in Boston. And the person who made the deal was Nathan's wife, Elizabeth Graves. She went from, oh, by the way, Keene by this time was abandoned because after the attack, he was abandoned. and Nathan went back to his hometown of Rentham, which I think is relatively near Brockton, right? Am I right about that?
Um, I
Mm,
think it's in Middlesex County, where
Yeah. Anyway.
but
It's in
Massachusetts isn't a huge state, so it's
yeah.
not
It's in
yeah, it's
it's
about
not right
southeastern
next door. But
40
Massachusetts.
minutes from us,
Place.
I think.
yeah,
I'd say
that sounds
40
right.
minutes away.
Yeah. so so anyway, that in a nutshell is the real story. Now, when I started writing the story, I I I stayed very close to the history, except for one thing. Nathan, instead of marrying his master's wife when he died, he married his daughter, who I called Black Dirt. That was her name. Um, let's see. I gotta look at my notes here. Uh, so anyway, but when I wrote the first draft of that book, I wrote it from the perspective of Nathan, and I wrote it in a really peculiar way. I think I mentioned earlier that I always write in a different way, uh, and I decided that I wanted to write this book retro style. So instead of writing the draft on a computer, which in those days I had a desktop computer at my office at Dartmouth College where I was a teacher. Uh,
Mm.
but I decided I was going to write it uh, on a typewriter, and I wrote my first novel on uh, a, a big manual typewriter, uh, an Underwood brand typewriter that I inherited from my uncle, the man I'm named after. He's a Catholic priest. He was a Catholic priest, and his name was Joseph Ernest Vaccaris. Vaccaris is a Italian Frenchified Americanized name. Uh, and so my name is actually Joseph Ernest Vaccaris Hebert. That's the full name. And I inherited uh, this typewriter, and I wrote my first novel on it. And I decided I was going to write this novel uh, uh, about Nathan Blake, which was the original title of the book, on a manual typewriter. So I took that typewriter. I wanted to go to a really remote place, and I went to Port Mansfield, Texas. Port Mansfield, Texas is a on the Gulf of Mexico. It's a little tiny town, 26 miles to the nearest grocery store. But there was a kind of a motel there, and I rented a room to motel. And I had my manual typewriter. I would write. I wrote all day, and I wrote in the morning mainly, and I wrote all morning. Had lunch at the little restaurant down below, and then in the afternoon, I would take drives or I would walk the beach, and it was really exciting to walk the beach in which I was the only person. I'm talking about January. It's January, beautiful weather at Port Mansfield, and and then I wrote at night. So I wrote morning and night, and I wrote for maybe must have been about a little more than a month, and I got to tell you the truth, I got tired of writing on a typewriter, and I called Dartmouth College and the Dr. Robin Hadlock, who was the office manager there, and she mailed me my great big uh, uh, computer, and I finished the draft on the computer, and I wrote the book. I called it Nathan Blake, and I gave it to my editor at the University Press of New England. He said, this is a good book. We'll publish it. But I could tell I could tell by the look on his face. I could tell also by my agent. Sally Brady, that they thought it was okay, but I thought, oh, I can do better than this. So I said, don't. There's something wrong with this book. I didn't know what it was, and I said, don't publish it. And so I was kind of in a mood of, I want to write, I want to make this great, but I couldn't really figure out how to do it. I had a draft that was okay, but I wanted to make it better. And so what happened, I took a break from it and I volunteered at the college to direct a foreign studies program in Trinidad. Trinidad Trinidad and Tobago is a small island nation just off the coast of Venezuela. So it's almost on the equator, and it's only 6 miles from Venezuela. It's just a big island. And I went there and I taught at the University of West Indies there. My students took classes there. I had my students, I took Dartmouth students to this foreign studies program.
What period of time was this?
This is 1998.
Okay. No, my
1990.
husband graduated from Dartmouth in 71.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was I started at Dartmouth in 1981.
Ah,
I was
okay.
there 26 years.
Yeah. His brother and his father also went there.
Did he like his experience at Dartmouth?
He didn't like it was all male. He didn't care for that.
It was all male in those days.
Yep, it was all male.
When I got there, it was about half and half.
Ah, okay. Yeah. They used to put them on a bus, the male students, and take them down to Mount Holyoke.
Isn't that
so they could meet the girls there.
It's going to be an awful experience, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, you meet somebody for what, 20 minutes, and then what do you do? Huh.
Yeah. And his father graduated from Dartmouth in 37, and he didn't want any girls there. He said that there should be he called them tomatoes. There should be no tomatoes at Dartmouth.
No tomatoes in Dartmouth.
No tomatoes at Dartmouth. So anyways, I didn't want to interrupt your story, but I was curious of the timeline when you were there. Yes. He actually
anyway.
saw Meryl Streep, I think it was Meryl Streep, was one of the first female. They allowed like 2 or 3 female students to take classes there.
And I took 13 students there, and 7 of them were members of the women's track team.
Oh.
So I had all these women athletes.
Changed.
It was to tell you the truth, it was great fun. I loved it, and I didn't give a single thought to do any writing there. I just did my job. And then when the term ended around Christmas time, the students all went away. I stayed, and my wife and 2 daughters showed up, and we spent Christmas season about a week in Trinidad. We went to the beach every day. It was wonderful. Well, to get back to my story here. So when I got on the plane to fly from Trinidad to Miami, I started to think about my story, and all of a sudden it hit me what was wrong with it. What was wrong with the draft I'd already written? And the answer was that Nathan Blake, though he was a real person, was kind of too good to be true. He was, like I said, he was a physically powerful person. He was a really good, decent person. That's the kind of guy you want, we're on your side. But that's also the kind of guy does not make a good protagonist for a novel. You want somebody a little bit messed up in their head. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just messed up in their head. Well, anyway, as I thought about it, I realized that the real protagonist should be not the captive, Nathan Blake, but the captor, the old guy who captured him.
Mm.
And um, so I went back and rewrote the entire story, keeping the same facts and everything, but from the perspective of the captor. And all I knew about him was that he was an older man. He was a leader in this little tribe, uh, and and he spoke English. And he and his friend, he and Nathan became very friendly to one another. Uh, but he must have had a lot of problems. I mean, the one of the really interesting problems for a novelist was that this was a time period in which there were three forces. There were the English, the French, and then the native peoples, and they were all having an identity crisis because since the Europeans showed up, the English, people in Massachusetts and New England and the South, they had been there for 150 years, so they really weren't English anymore, but they didn't know what they were. So they were having an identity crisis. The French uh, habitants were also having a crisis. They weren't really French anymore. And the native peoples, the Indians, had been so exposed to European ways that they too were having an identity crisis. So I wanted to deal with that issue. And of course, that crisis got solved with the American Revolution. The English became Americans, the French became Canadians, and the Indians pretty much got screwed. That's
Mm.
pretty much what happened. Uh, and so I wanted to bring that conflict into my story. Uh, and also I felt very comfortable writing about an old man because at the time my dad uh, uh, after my mother died, my dad moved in with my family, uh, my wife and two daughters and my dad, and he was there for I don't know 3 years, 4 years until he died. He's 88 when he died. And then lo and behold, who moved in? My wife's dad. So and he stayed till he was 91. So I had a lot of experience with old men
Yeah.
because they lived in my house. So I felt comfortable writing about an old guy. So I rewrote this entire book. And I think I mentioned earlier that a lot of the native peoples in those days were called the English called them Americans. And so that's why the title of the book is called The Old American, because it's based on the captor who was an older man and an American. And at the end of the book, uh, Nathan eventually became, I think, said a revolutionary and died at 100 years old. So by then, he was an old American. So the book begins and ends with those two phrases, the old American. It was, I just loved writing it.
I have a question. When did I mean, the British sent people here and we were the colonies. When did they actually start referring it as America? When was that
Uh,
term
uh,
generally used?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know this much that the English uh, eventually, in Massachusetts and Virginia, those were the two really uh, the strongest revolutionary states. By the
Right,
time that they were fomenting revolution after the French and Indian Wars,
right,
I think that they were then starting to call themselves Americans. They were thinking of themselves not as English, and most of them had never been to England, right? And their
right,
children and their
right,
parents hadn't been to England, so they were thinking they were thinking of themselves uh, as Massachusetts people and also as Americans. And so I think to answer your question, I think it was a gradual kind of change that occurred.
yeah,
But once 1776 came along and the American Revolution came along, then everybody was here considered themselves Americans, except the Tories, who were sticking with England. So, but
right,
basically,
right.
that's when the country became uh, America.
Yeah, I had
Yeah,
never really thought about that too much. I mean, what did the Spanish call this continent? What did the French call the continent?
Right.
I think the
Yeah,
French called it New France. I mean, that was,
New France. Okay, thank
that's
you.
uh,
right.
but
Yeah, and New
yeah,
Amsterdam, wasn't that New
I,
York?
uh, I do notice, I think you have a conversation. I just started the book. I'm only about 50 pages in, but it does seem like you have a conversation between Nathan Blake and Caucus Meteor, where Nathan mentions that, he was born in Wentham and he's never been to England. And
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just got to the gauntlet scene, which was pretty brutal.
You got to the gauntlet scene?
Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, what fascinated me about that whole story was that the, all the three forces, the French, the English, and the natives, they all behaved in a noble way. And in fact, when Nathan was swapped for this French officer held in Boston, his his wife uh, negotiated for this change, and she gave money. She raised money. She gave it to her uh, brother-in-law, Nathan's brother, and two friends. So the three guys walked all the way to Quebec uh, under a white flag that was honored. I mean, they walked through enemy territory, but because they had a white flag that was on it, they had all this money, and they gave the money to the French governor to make this change. Oh, but I say they walked all the way to Canada with their captive. They had a captive that they
Mm,
brought to swap with Nathan. Uh, and the captive was more important than native because he was an officer. Well, anyway, the the bottom line was the governor made the swap, but he refused to take the money. So they were able to go back to Rentham with Nathan and the money they brought to swap him for. So all three of those groups, the English, the French, and the natives, behaved in a very honorable kind of way.
so,
mm.
where do we have Nathan's story from? Did he write a narrative when he got back?
No, Nathan never wrote a word. He told his story,
Okay.
and he told it um to three different people. One of whom was a man named Simon Griffin, who was a former officer in the English Army, and he wrote the first history of Keene and told that story from Nathan's perspective. And what I found fascinating about Nathan's point of view was that he never showed any animosity toward these native peoples.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I imagine that's kind of interesting considering the other narratives that I know of, were like the Hannah Duston one, where it's the polar opposite.
Oh yeah, right. But and there's a lot of narratives like that. What fascinated me about this narrative was that it was different. There was no killing. It was all done through diplomacy. I was fascinated by it. And also the fact that Nathan actually had an Indian wife. that's that's pretty extraordinary, don't you think?
Imagine what church he belonged to didn't find too pleasant a thought, but
Uh, Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Now, what is the time period that this happened?
1746 to 1749. So it was just at the beginning of what became the French and Indian Wars.
Okay.
There was
And
a lot of,
long after the King Philip Wars.
pardon?
Long after the King Philip Wars.
Yeah, that's right. The King Philip War was
That was pretty
1675
brutal.
to 1678.
Right.
By the way, the King Philip War, as some of you probably know, was the most destructive war in American history, in the whole history of America, when it came to destruction of property and people and
Yeah, it was
casualties.
very brutal.
Very brutal, very brutal.
Yeah.
And after that war, there was um, before that war, there was a kind of an uneasy peace between the the future combatants. But after that war, uh, things were much worse.
Yeah.
Uh,
But then it seemed to have settled down a bit when Nathan was taken.
yeah, there was an Indian attack. They and they, one of the issues was that the English were settling, creating settlements, getting closer and closer to Canada, and
Yeah.
the Indians had gone to a lot of the refugees from the King Philip War ended up in Canada, and probably one reason that Nathan's captor spoke English, he was an older man. He probably was raised as a young man in what we would call today the United States, Connecticut, Rhode Island, uh, Massachusetts, around that area. Uh, uh, and so he spoke. He learned English very young. He learned it well.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. I would imagine also I don't know which churches were around them, but the ministers or whatever were teaching um, the Indians English.
Well, in this story, Nathan often prayed, but there isn't much about religion in the story itself.
Right.
It was on the sidelines.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't sure if the old man had been exposed to English also through trade and church ministers and that way. That's why he could speak English.
Yeah, I didn't see any of that in the stuff I read.
Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting.
I did come up. One of the fascinating sources I wrote was written by a guy named Peter Kalm, Kalm. He was a Swedish scientist, and the Swedish government sent him to the New World to um, to document everything he saw. And so he landed in Delaware and walked all the way to Quebec. And he kept notes about things he saw, the plants, the animals, and the people. And one thing he wrote about the about the native peoples he saw, that they were very handsome people. And in fact, this is one part that I just love reading this. In Vermont, he walked into a village, and he described the women as really pretty, and they wore. He described how they wore skins, like deer skins, dresses cut above the knee, which for that time period for a European must have been pretty sexy, right?
All right. All right.
And they wore a band around the neck and head, and that was it. That was their jewelry. By comparison, the men were gaudy as all hell. They loved
the
European
wampum.
medallions. They had tattoos, piercings, and this line is actually in the history. He
Yeah.
said that the women complained that it took the men forever to get ready in the morning.
So,
Could you
what year was
believe that?
what years was he going through?
What's that?
What years was Peter Kalm going through?
Oh, he arrived in 1747, and so it's the same time period. And he
Okay.
walked all the way to Quebec.
I'd heard
And one thing he talked about that he liked seeing was that a lot of the natives wore birch bark hats.
Hmm.
I had heard that the natives were horrified when they saw the English, because the English were all scarred up from smallpox and chicken pox, and so they had a lot of scarring on them. Whereas
They
the
also
Native
had,
Americans
they also
didn't.
had a lot of they had bad teeth.
Yep, bad teeth, and then
Bad teeth,
and the Native Americans did not hadn't been exposed to that
no.
yet, so their skin
But
was
you know, eventually, and you know this, the natives were very susceptible to smallpox,
right, and then
it
devastated
just
them.
it just devastated
Yeah,
And
yeah.
devastated
leptospirosis, I think, was the other one, right?
pardon?
I think leptospirosis was the other one that was really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you read
Yeah.
Did you read 1491? Because I remember he has a great description in that where he talks.
No, I never read that. The only history I know well is the history of
Nathan.
during that time period where I was researching for Nathan.
Yeah.
Everything that happened before, I just have a glancing knowledge of.
But he sort of speculates the natives encountering the English at Plymouth Colony. And so, he sort of talks about the natives see these short people who smell bad because they probably haven't taken a bath in their lives. They have bad teeth. And the natives are much taller and healthier. And
They also, I heard they treated their children better. Some of the pilgrims and so forth were, they would beat their children, use the rod, and don't spoil the child. And the Native Americans did not discipline children that way. So I thought that was interesting perspective.
That's true. I read that also.
Yeah.
So is Nathan Blake kind of regarded as a local hero in Keene? Is like he's someone you hear about sort of all through school?
Yeah, he was very much a hot shot,
Okay.
a keen hot shot. For
Is he
one
buried
thing, he was such a physical guy. He was a wrestler and a runner and just a very athletic man. He was also kind of daring. He was a there's he lost a horse on the ice. So why was he taking a horse on the ice? He was a daring guy. Then before he was captured, at the very beginning when they started to settle the town, uh, he and his brother and another guy stayed over in the Keene, which then was known as Upper Ash Willet, for they wanted to experience a winter there, so they're there all alone, and it was so hard they just barely made it back to Massachusetts. Uh,
Where's he buried?
Pardon?
Where is he buried? Do you know?
He's buried in a cemetery in Keene.
Okay.
I've
Okay.
been to his gravesite.
Yeah.
I told you he built a log house, and his son built the timber frame house. And 6 generations of that family lived on this site, which right now is a Keene State College building called Blake House.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, one thing I have liked about this book is the different perspective, because there are so many kind of captivity narratives that are from the European captive, and this is, I think, one of the few that I know about that's from the other perspective.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book. It came to me as an insight on that airplane on the way back from Trinidad, from the perspective of the captor, from the captor rather than the captive, to see what the Indians' point of view was, and to get some of that knowledge, I went to Canada, and I interviewed an Iroquois uh, uh, town called I think it's called Caughnawaga. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's across the St. Lawrence River from Montreal, and then I went to Quebec and interviewed a tribe there, and right now I'm blanking on the name. Anyway, one thing that was really different about both those tribes is the Iroquois uh, uh, town. All the people there looked very native. They looked like Indians. They were big, dark complected, and just had the features. And so there was very little. There seemed to be very little intermarriage there, and they hated the French. They had bad relations with the French. And when they found out that I was from the States, then they talked to me. When they thought I was a Frenchman, they wouldn't talk to me. But that was that situation. When I went to talk to the group in the native group in Quebec City, they had been rescued by the French. 100 years before, and because they were allies, there was a lot of intermarriage, and so that racially, they didn't look a whole lot different from the French people, but they kept their native ways. So I thought that was fascinating that the wars that those people from both sides experienced uh, 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 carried over culturally into the 20th century, 1990s.
So you found that they were pretty welcoming and embraced your novel.
Yeah, well, everybody wants to tell a story. Everybody wants to tell a story. So if you tell people that you're writing uh, even a news story, people want to tell their story. So I didn't have any problems at all getting access to people
Yeah,
telling.
because I was just thinking, was there any hostility about, this outsider writing about our culture, but you didn't really find that.
Uh, no, just the opposite. They were
That,
uh, they loved Americans. Uh, this is now, of course, we have. I don't think most
Things have
Canadian
changed.
people are that crazy about the U.S. right now. But when I went there doing my research around 1995, 96, I had the run of the place. It was wonderful.
Mm, yeah. Okay.
so
I'll
have
tell
you
you,
ever found,
if you want to learn a lot about New England Indians, read books by Colin Calloway. Colin Calloway is
that
he's
name sounds familiar.
a Scotsman, and he came to the States, and he's a Native American scholar. And one thing that attracted him about Native Americans is that he came, as a Catholic Scot. Uh, he felt that there was a parallelism between the English and the Protestant English and Protestant Scots and the Catholics. Uh, there was a tremendous amount of struggle between those forces. And when he came to the States, he saw the similar um, uh, animosity between Americans and Native Americans.
Let's see, what else can I ask? Have you found yourself tempted to write any other more historical novels?
Uh, I wanted to write about this, Nathan's wife, his not his native wife, but his English wife, Elizabeth Graves, because after Nathan was captured, she went to Boston, where there was a French officer. Uh, his name was, can you believe it, Rambo.
Hmm.
uh,
Is that the one who
and
you
and
introduced
I,
in the book?
so he was a prisoner. He was a prisoner in Boston, and this is in the history. It said that he charmed the women of Boston. Now, how a POW gets to do that, I don't know. But anyway, she somehow hooked up with this guy and had some kind of relationship with him, and they cooked up this prisoner swap between him, Rambo, and uh, Nathan, and another captor whose name I forget right now.
So is he the character that you introduced in the book, the Pierre?
Yeah,
Um, I was pronouncing it Rambal, but I guess it's actually pronounced Rambo.
yeah,
Plain, plain.
yeah. It's kind of funny, don't you think?
Yeah.
Uh,
Have,
anyway, I wanted to write that story, but I just didn't have the chops to do it. But
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear or maybe guess at her perspective.
I think a
Finding
woman
out
needs
her husband had
I think a
married a
woman needs
native
to write that story.
woman. Hmm?
I think a woman needs to write the Elizabeth Graves story. I don't think
Yeah.
I have enough knowledge to do that. But I think a good woman writer could do a better job with it than I can do with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Why don't you write it, Josette?
So, so how
I'm
did you come up with the
busy.
name? Um, so how did you come up with the name Caucasus Meteor?
Well, I wanted a cool name, and
Yeah,
I read that the word caucus. A lot of people think that the derivation of that word is from uh, nobody's quite sure, but they think that it's from a Native American language, and it
yeah, that's
means
what I.
a gathering of play, a gathering. So I like that name, caucus. And in my story, this is not in the histories. All right, in my story, Caucasus Meteor is the son of King Philip in
Oh, okay.
King Philip's War. He was known as Metacomet, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, and so
King
I
Philip
thought, well,
has
Metacomet meteor. So I put the two
yeah,
words together.
interesting.
And I thought one thing was interesting about King Philip Metacomet was that eventually he was killed, and his wife and son were sold into slavery in the Caribbean. And there were a lot of rumors, you know, that the son came back to the States, uh, and so in my imagination, uh, that the son of Metacomet was Caucasus Meteor.
Yeah, so King Philip's War has come up in the narrative, but they didn't mention that yet.
Uh, it'll come in.
Yeah, I can
It
imagine.
comes in sideways in the novel.
Yeah. Huh.
They talked about King Philip's head.
Oh, yeah, that horrible. Yeah.
They put his head on a pole in, I think, outside of Plymouth.
Yeah, and then I think they left it there for years.
Yeah.
Pretty horrible.
Well, there was a lot of heads on pikes back then. There were yeah. I
There,
read a story of a family in Attleboro that their son was out farming, a British family was out farming, and they were attacked. I think it was King Philip's War time, and the son got caught and beheaded, and his head put on a pike. So the family was in their home, and that's what they got to look out at is their son. They couldn't leave because they would be attacked. So, yeah, it was a pretty brutal time, and certainly,
uh, I'll say you're right. There was some really awful stuff. What one of the things was in Connecticut. Uh, this was in among the colonies. Was that there was a son who was so disrespectful to his father that he was hanged. He was he was hanged
yeah,
from,
yes,
for mouthing off to his dad.
yeah, yeah. Well, what they did to during the witch trials to the women in Salem, um, yeah,
Pretty bad stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And
We'd like to think we've moved past that, but sometimes I wonder.
Yeah,
yeah,
not quite.
Not quite. Yes. Yeah. I just can't picture how they walked, the distances they walked, the
Yeah,
canoeing.
oh,
Um,
imagine like this Swedish guy. Imagine walking from Delaware all the way to Quebec City. My
yeah,
God,
I know.
day after, yeah, that's pretty awesome.
And all the I don't care what time of year it was, the weather is gonna be bad. There are bad days and good days, but
Well, plus,
probably really awful days. And you didn't have you couldn't Google the weather and
think of
find out what.
all the rivers you have to cross.
Yes.
and
Yes.
having to actually remember the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, GPS.
No
Oh,
GPS.
GPS.
They even
That's
have,
cool. Well, I didn't have
yeah.
any GPS when I was in high school. Did you?
No,
I didn't
no.
even. Actually, I wrote my first book on a typewriter. That try to do that today.
The
Right.
the Dogs of March, right? That was your first book, right?
Pardon?
The
The
Dogs of
Dogs of
March.
March, right? Yeah. The way I wrote that book is that I would write a scene out in longhand, then I'd type a page in the typewriter, take the page out of the typewriter, pencil edit it, and then retype the page.
Hmm.
And I might do that anywhere from 5 to 20 times until I had. But when I got done, I had a good page, and and I found that the act of retyping uh, made me rethink the story, and it gave me uh, a deeper understanding of what I was writing. And so now when I'm writing, sometimes if things not going well, I'll retype the whole page, print it out, put it beside me, and just sit there and look at and retype it. And of course, as you retype, you tend to make changes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Can you
And
imagine Charles Darwin writing his, I don't know if he used a typewriter, or Dickens or Louisa May Alcott hand writing it and
or
longhand and
yeah,
crossing it out and
yeah.
trying to
Well,
correct.
imagine I did it for until I was 40 years old. I wrote
Right. I guess, yeah, I
I
get, now
wrote
that I think
longhand
about
and
it.
I typed
Yeah.
So,
on a manual typewriter. And
so I
Yeah.
was looking.
and I tell you, it's a lot of typing on a typewriter is a lot more fun than typing on a computer. When you type on a computer, you wiggle your fingers. You type on a typewriter, you have to strike the. It's a
Right.
more of a physical activity.
Do you
Yeah.
find it more satisfying just being able to strike the keys?
Well, it's satisfying for the first uh, day or so, and then you realize, where is my laptop?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, that's
spoiled
right.
now.
So you mentioned in the dedication in the Old American that you had 9 drafts. So what did you find were some of the biggest things that you were changing between the drafts?
Oh, well, the biggest thing was what I mentioned was the changing the entire perspective from
Yeah.
the captive to the captor. And I'll tell you, I wrote an entire book from Nathan's perspective, and when I junked it, I actually started over. I never looked at the old book. I
Hmm.
started over. I wrote the entire thing, but having written it, I had it internalized in my head. So so that was the biggest thing I made, and and using um, uh, some of creating some of the characters, creating Nathan's lover, uh, who I call Black Dirt, because among the natives in those times, the women were the farmers.
Hmm.
Not the men uh, uh, went to war and hunted. That was pretty much it. The women were the farmers. In fact, a lot of the natives were contemptuous of the Europeans because the men farmed. They thought that was women's work. And I'll tell you, I had a student who was a Crow Indian. You know, the Crow are in Montana, that area there, and I had a student at Dartmouth who was a really smart cookie, and I said to her, I said, how would you describe uh, your tribe? What are the values of the tribe? And she said hunting and warring. I said,
Yeah.
what does that mean? She said, it means, what does that mean in this day and age? She said, it means the men have nothing to do.
Mm. Huh. Now, do you develop each character as you're writing your novel, or do you develop them and insert them into the novel and maybe develop them a little bit more? But do you like write out a kind of, I guess, a synopsis or something of what the character, what you're looking for in that character?
Well, that's a very good question. It's at the heart of fiction writing. And the answer is both. Is that I always start with an idea of what I want for the character, but as I write and as I begin to gain a deeper understanding of the character, it's kind of like somebody you meet somebody in a social situation, and you kind of get along with them, and then once you get to know them, they become a lot more complex in your mind,
Yeah.
and that's the way it is for me for writing about a character. Is the more I write about the character, the more I understand about the character, and that's in a way that's the payoff for me is a deeper understanding of the character, and ultimately a deeper understanding of myself. I think that one thing that I do, I don't know if other writers do this, but I do it, is that I'm when I'm writing about somebody else, uh, I'm I'm often writing about myself, and what I like to do is I'll take a part of myself and put him into a character and exaggerate it.
Okay.
So, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so if I'm petty minded, I'll make the character much more petty minded. Uh,
Right.
so when you're to me, writing a novel is it's kind of writing about your secret self.
Right. Yeah.
I highly rec-
Um,
I highly recommend it. I think everybody ought to write a novel.
so
It-
I think I
Takes
remember reading
discipline.
somewhere from Tony Hillerman that he noticed a lot of what the Navajo did was referring to people by like character traits or like physical things that they picked up on. And so I noticed you
uh,
have one character who here is called Furrowed Brow all the time. So I'm
right,
wondering if
right.
that's another thing you noticed from people who you talk to, that they have like little nicknames that are based on some sort of distinctive.
Yeah, I definitely. I love doing that. And the character Black Dirt. That's what I call her. In a way, I was writing about my wife. My wife is a she's an earth goddess. She
Hmm.
she she's a gardener, and she's always playing in the dirt. And she's a tall, strong woman, and and that's the kind of woman I like. And so I wanted to give Nathan a a partner. I see. I didn't know anything. I don't know anything about his English wife. And I totally invented his Indian wife, and invented him out of my own um, my own wife. By the way, when I married my wife, she was 19. I was 27, and we celebrated our 57th wedding anniversary in March. And at 57, you know what I gave her for our anniversary? I gave her a bottle of ketchup, Heinz
Oh,
57.
I'll keep that in mind. Not up there yet, but it's getting there.
She, we,
how did she feel about that?
yeah, I love.
Took him a while to get the ketchup out of his shirt.
Well, I guess she's had 57 years to get used to.
Yeah.
So, can you both tell me a little, since you're my only audience, you tell me a little bit about yourselves, or you might not want to reveal any of that?
Uh, I mean, I can do that. I mean, one reason I'm doing this New Hampshire author thing is because I grew up in New Hampshire.
Where?
Um, I'm in Concord.
Okay, Concord. That's how I think you told me that. Right, right.
Yeah. So I've been trying to, I feel like Massachusetts gets kind of overrepresented of the New England states in terms of writers. So I'm trying to go and just kind of find some. I was thinking I might go on and do some other New England states too and just kind of try to find. But
Yeah,
I,
you know who'd be a great guy for you to talk to would be Joe Citro. Joe Citro is a Vermont writer, and
okay.
he's a he writes horror genre books. He's written a number of
Oh, okay.
horror
That could
genre
be
books.
good.
Yeah,
But yeah,
really.
I first found Merle Drown, and then I think you were mentioned in a review of one of his books, so that's how I ended up finding your name.
Yeah.
And then somehow I found Robert Biederman. I can't remember how I came across his name, but
There's
How
I think
did you become a How did you become a librarian? What's the
um,
backstory there?
well, I studied English, and so I know I like to read, and I know I like talking about literature, so it just felt kind of like a natural fit.
Yeah.
Not that I spend that much of my day talking about books. I don't get to talk about it enough because often people just want to print things. But I do run the book club, so there we get to talk about books.
interesting. There's a woman
Well, what
who,
about you, Josette? What's your background?
oh, I'm a retired psychiatric nurse, registered nurse, and
Hey, I almost married a psychiatric nurse.
would have got
I
free
I,
help.
I was when I went to New Orleans, I worked at DePaul Psychiatric Hospital. I was an
Oh,
attendant there, and I uh, ended up the my boss ended up being my girlfriend.
Hmm.
yeah. Now I'm a full-time caregiver because my husband's now disabled. So
Oh,
yeah, so I'm full-time caregiver, but I do a lot of reading. Yeah, and gardening. I do a lot of gardening, and
guiding. So you're an earth goddess too, huh?
yes, I do not go to have a pedicure or manicure because it would never last. I don't know if your wife gets manicures, but I'm like, nah, it's not gonna work for me because I get my hands into the soil.
How did you decide to specialize in psychiatry when you were a nurse?
Well, I already had a degree in psychology from UMass Boston,
Well, that kind
and
of begs the question. Why did you
why did I go
specialize
into that?
psychology?
Um, I I actually wanted to go into sciences, but in the late 60s, early 70s, I was advised that there would be no jobs for women in science and that I should stick to elementary education. And so I started out with that and then switched over to psychology because I thought there's a little bit of science in that. So I could, you know, get a job in psychology. And then I went back to school to become a registered nurse because again there was science involved. I had to take chemistry classes and I had to take anatomy and physiology and all of that. But back in, the early 70s, women didn't have a lot of options. My high
Yeah, you
school
could be
guidance counselor was basically, I said I wanted to be a science teacher and he said you'll never find a job in that as a woman, be an elementary education teacher. So,
yeah. In those days, you could be a nurse or a waitress, or a secretary. That was about it, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. And my mother was working at the VA hospital, and she told me that the nurses there were amazing. They were so impressive. So that always stuck in my mind. And my grandmother was a nurse,
Yeah,
graduated in
my
1922.
my mother was a nurse.
Yeah. And there
Yeah,
wasn't a whole lot of options.
wasn't a whole lot of my mother was a nun for 5 years, and then
Huh.
she left the convent not because she had a crisis of faith, but because she wanted a family. And then she went to nursing school.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah. Now, my grandmother was a nurse in Pennsylvania. 1922, she graduated. Yeah. So it's, it was I've heard people say, women were housewives, and maybe in the 50s for some women that was true, but there's a lot of women have worked, especially women of color have had to
You're
work outside the home. They have,
you're absolutely right.
they've
My
done it all.
my father was worked in a factory. He was a
Right.
mill worker, had very little education, and my mother was the intellectual center of the family, and she worked as a
Yeah.
nurse.
My
Yeah,
mother always worked. Growing up, she always worked.
yeah, yeah. But
So,
where did you grow up?
Oh, me? In
Yeah.
Massachusetts, in Whitman, which is a town next to Brockton.
What town again?
Whitman.
Whitman. I don't know that town.
Ah,
Yeah.
well, that goes back a long way. And actually, I had my late brother-in-law's house was partially burned down in 1680. Well, it was built in 1680. Anyways, with the Indian Wars, they had what they called
Well,
an Indian
that does
that they
during
would
the
hide in.
King Philip War.
It was the original house was burned down. They rebuilt it in 1680. So the original house was burned down in the King Philip Wars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they put an Indian hole in the newer house, the 1680 house. Yeah. To hide in. So yeah, when you grow up around here, there's a lot of, a lot of stuff you come across about
so did you find working in a psychiatric hospital for a while gave you material for novels?
Oddly enough, it didn't. What I loved about New Orleans was I love the culture of the city.
Yeah,
I
I love New
and
Orleans a lot too.
I learned so much about people of color. I grew up in like a regular New Hampshire boy, and I worked as a night attendant, 11 to 7, and I worked with a black woman uh, named Joan Cotton, uh, and she was a really older woman. She was in her 30s.
Hmm.
I was I was I was in my 20s, and we had nothing to do but talk to each other. And she schooled me on black Roman Catholic uh, middle class because her husband, I mean, they were both college graduates. Her husband was a school teacher, and she had 4 kids, and but she worked nights on my shift,
right. Yeah.
and so I just learned so much about black culture there, and then um, I can remember, I'm dark complected, and I got darker there because there was a lot of sunshine there, and I can remember going to a party at her house, and I was the only white person there, and this woman come up to me, she said, "Joan just told me you were white." She said, "I thought you were a big old Creole boy." So, I think one of the great things that happened to me in New Orleans was learning black culture. But I worked with schizophrenics, and
Right.
but because I had no education, I was just uh, I just there and working 11 to 7. Schizophrenics have to sleep like everybody else. So I had
Yeah,
very few things, very few bad things happen. The only The only time I was a hero, it was when there was this guy who was a young guy who was acting out, and we used to have control rooms. You probably know about that, right, Josette?
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, and so I was trying to get him into a control room because I didn't want him to hurt himself, and I didn't want to call the head nurse. This is like 2 o'clock in the morning, because I
Yeah.
didn't want to. What they used to do would, if you had really trouble, you would call the head nurse, and she would call the cops, and I didn't want
Oh,
to. I didn't want to do that, so
yeah.
I asked him to get into trouble. He wouldn't do it. He was standing, defying, and I just turned around and I just surprised him, and I said, "Boo!" And he jumped back, and I closed the door.
Oh,
So
you're lucky. We
that
used to
was my
do,
that was my one
yeah, we
one
had
one
what
big
was
act there.
we
But
had
then
what was called mail calls. We would get on the phone when we had a patient getting agitated, and we thought there may be violence involved. We would get on the phone and call, do a mail call on South One or whatever the unit we were on, and all the available males in the building would come running down, and they would come through that door like an army, and usually it's just the sight of a lot of males that would calm the patient down or make them think twice about doing anything. Every now and then there would be a takedown where they would really, slam them to the floor and uh, restrain them.
yeah, I was part of a group we would do that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
also I assisted on electroshock treatment. Have you ever?
Oh, I didn't. I had patients go out for that. They didn't do it at the hospital I was at, but they
Yeah,
they sent them out for that. Um,
yeah.
not too many. Not too many went out for that. And I actually did. I hate to say it. I can think of at least
I,
one case where really the person really improved amazingly. Um, with
that's right. It was good for depression. Uh,
Yeah, it was strange. It did work with some people, but
yeah.
you know, um, yeah, we saw some strange things happen.
Well, I worked at DePaul Hospital in New Orleans. Where did you work?
I worked in Pembroke Hospital in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
My grandfather was from New Orleans.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My grandfather's side of the family, New Orleans. He had so many kids, and when he ran out of money, they would put the children in an orphanage, and they would take care of them in the orphanage till my grandfather's father and mother could get back on their feet, and then they would go take the kids home from the orphanage.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Yeah, I can remember when I got hired at the DePaul Hospital. I went there. I had a bad love affair, and I just wanted to get the hell out of. So I decided to take a term off from college, take a semester off, and travel. And I got to New Orleans. I just fell in love with the city, and I thought maybe I can get a job here. And so I answered an ad for an attendant at this mental hospital, and the head nurse looked me over, and she said, "Well, she said you're not so big you're going to scare anybody, but you're big enough."
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
so
that would be
I was the right size to be an attendant.
right.
Not too big, but big enough.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
humbling.
Yeah. But then I had um, I got friendly with my boss, and so she ended up being my girlfriend. And I think if I hadn't been a college student, I probably would have stayed in New Orleans. But I wanted to be a writer, and nobody I knew was writing, so I thought I better go back to college. So I did.
I'm convinced that everybody should take a gap year. They graduate from high school and they should not go directly off to college. They should travel. They should experience things
I think
and
that's
then decide their
Well,
major and think
how
about
how
things.
about How about service for your country, like either the military or a Peace Corps type of
That, yeah,
yeah,
AmeriCorps, that's what my friend
yeah,
said. We should all have to do some kind of service,
yeah. I think that would be a good idea.
for a year or two before you go off to college and have to make decisions without any experience other than what you went through in high school,
Yeah.
you know. I think Prince Henry, or no, was it Prince Harry? He did that. He went off. He worked on a sheep farm in Australia. He did all sorts of things.
Lucky guy.
Yeah, he was lucky.
Australia.
Most people, yeah, they don't. They graduate from high school, go right off to college, and they really haven't had a chance to see. And
Yeah, I couldn't get into college when I graduated. They wouldn't let me in. I had bad grades and didn't do well on tests.
yeah, no,
So
and I really liked humanity.
I went in the army. I spent time in the army before I went to
Yeah,
college.
but I had a friend say once, not everybody can go into the military. That's the thing. And, people have various health issues or whatever. He's a genetic health issue, and he could never do that. But he would have loved to have gone off and like worked for a city as a community service person and help with planting trees or even just working with the disabled and anything like that. He would have loved to have done that. But your
Yeah,
options seem to be military or college.
I totally agree with you. I think some kind of community service would be really good for the for the country, for the community, and for
Right.
the individual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done some of that. Not before college, but just in high school, I was in the church youth group, and we did some of that. Um, Whenever we went on mission trips, we didn't really do any proselytizing. We more just did community service.
Right. Right.
And then for 8 years, I was working at an independent living center. So I did a lot of what I did was paperwork, but sometimes I'd help people with working on different life skills or just getting services.
Did you just say BIKE skills?
In like independent living skills, like
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
so yeah, sort of how they'd support themselves. But most of the two I worked with kind of had some very definite, like, oh, I want to get housing or get a job, but sometimes that involved just kind of learning some skills that maybe they hadn't learned because no one expected people with disabilities to do anything like 20 years ago.
It's true. That's true.
But
You run a book club, right? You said you run a
yeah,
book club. There was a woman I was following on YouTube, and what she does is she'll pick, like, make a theme, like this next couple of months we're going to read books that are all based in Europe or all based in China and the Philippines. And
yeah,
you mentioned
we're
New
kind of
England.
all over the place.
You mentioned New England, so yeah, it would be interesting for 1 month to just focus on books from New Hampshire, focus on books from Vermont, fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah, I think
Maine.
I would have loved to do this book, but the issue is I like to really be able to provide accessibility. So, and I couldn't find an audiobook for this one. So I like to at least have an audiobook in case people have trouble with print books.
Right. Yeah. My husband has to have large print books.
Yes.
Yeah,
If I can get large print, I like to have it. But
exactly. It's difficult to find large print books.
yeah, I think that the problem is when a book is really popular, then they'll be printing the large print. But once it stops being on the bestseller list, then the large print goes out of print.
Right. Right.
Does Brockton have a local novelist?
Yeah, we have a few.
Yeah.
We have oh, what's his name? LaCapua. I'm blanking on. He seems to write a lot. And then we have someone who just moved here who wrote like a horror thriller novel. I'm blanking on Laura Lee Barr, I think her name is. We
There
did
was
an
a
event
young
with her.
there was a young woman that was writing more, youth focused novels.
Yeah, I'll have to. We have a
Yeah,
local author section that for some reason, we didn't have one when I started here. So I said, oh, we should have a local authors.
right, right. Yeah,
But
yeah.
we do have some.
Yeah, the audiobooks are really good when I'm out walking. If I can get out and get a walk in,
Yeah,
the audio.
as long as there's a good reader. So sometimes it's good to have an author reading their own books. Other times you really don't want to.
I'll tell you one that I read that she was amazing. Audiobook that I listened to was Michelle Obama's book.
Yeah, I could imagine
That
her having a good
was incredible. Her book was when she read it, it was just. I tell people you got to listen to her. The way she read that book, it was just really
yeah, but
brings
I
you.
think some that I've heard is apparently there's a version of Lord of the Flies where William Golding is reading it, and apparently he has like a monotone.
Yeah. So,
You really don't. He just has kind of this deep monotone,
right, right.
which I think he realized because one point on NPR they were playing like clips from Nobel Prize speeches. Um, and William Golding, he opened his with like something like, "For those of you who are familiar with my work, you undoubtedly know that you're in for 10 minutes of gloom and despair." So like he sort of realized that he has like this deep monotone, but I think
Yeah,
having to deal with it for a whole book.
right, right. Yeah. Hmm.
I could see you reading one of your books. I think you'd have a good reading voice, Ernest.
Well, I, uh, I like, I used to like to do readings, uh, but I discovered that usually the most pleased person at a reading is the reader.
Yeah.
Well, readers love reading their own stuff.
So I'm just
Writers love reading their own stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I'm just looking at the time and I need to get some dinner before I have to be on the desk. So
And my
if
laptop battery is dying.
I actually
Well,
have
even
it,
though we didn't have a big audience, I really enjoyed
yeah, and
talking to you. It was more intimate than if we'd had a bunch of people.
Ah,
and if anyone has any questions when they're watching the recording, I can send them on because I notice we do have a few people who have checked out the Facebook Live. And as I said, we put this on our YouTube channel and people do check that out sometimes.
yeah.
Well, I have a Facebook, under my name. So if anybody
Yeah,
wants to check me out. I publish a lot of smart ass kind of stuff. I love,
yeah, I've been reading your posts. I liked
yeah,
the one about writing cliches that you shouldn't use.
yeah, right. I love that stuff.
Well,
Um,
this was interesting, and I really appreciate it. And
and
I'm
this
I'm
was
not French, even though my name is French, Josette. I am not French. I am.
so
My mother was from Bohemia. Yeah.
Was that
interesting.
is that where the LSUK name comes in?
No, that was my father. Actually,
Yeah.
my yeah. It's my husband's name is actually Cochran, and my name was Lusk. And but that was the New Orleans branch, Lusk down in New Orleans. And my mother couldn't figure out what to name me, and the nurse was French. So the nurse mentioned Josette, and my mother liked the name. So I ended up with Josette, even though
Well,
I'm
that's a
not
nice
French.
name.
It is.
I come across it very rarely, every now and then. And one night I was working in a nursing home, and my aide's name was Josette. She was from Haiti. And I was like, this is the first time I've ever had to deal with somebody named Josette while I was, working. And yeah, so they'd say our name and both of us would be looking over. And I've never had that in my entire life, having a name other
I
people have.
occasionally, I occasionally come across another Warren, but not that much.
I knew a Warren. Yeah.
Um,
And they're
but
going
yes,
back to more older fashioned names too.
yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah.
So this was great, and I'll have the recording up in a few days.
And I'll check Ernest's Facebook page.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks a lot for having me.
thanks for coming. This was great.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Okay, bye.